Life happens. With ADT, you can feel safe with an ADT starter kit professionally installed for only $49. Call today and install an ADT starter kit that includes security panel, keypad, key fob, entry and motion sensors, and for a limited time, get a camera included and installed at no additional cost. That's a $449 value installed for just $49.
Requires 36-month monitoring contrast, QSB, and EasyPay. Activation and early term fees may apply. Certain marks excluded. License available at ADT.com, Florida EF001121, Louisiana F1639.
Life happens. With ADT, you can feel safe with an ADT starter kit professionally installed for only $49. Call today and install an ADT starter kit that includes security panel, keypad, key fob, entry and motion sensors, and for a limited time, get a camera included and installed at no additional cost. That's a $449 value installed for just $49.
Requires 36-month monitoring contrast, QSB, and EasyPay. Activation and early term fees may apply. Certain marks excluded. License available at ADT.com, Florida EF001121, Louisiana F1639.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
Chris Canty, co-host of Humpty and Canty, which follows us on ESPN 98.7 FM ESPN in New York, joins us now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. Chris, thanks for being with us on Golic and Wingo. Clearly, you guys are going to have a lot to talk about today. But one of the things that I've noticed once this news came down is the overwhelming reaction by people like yourself that were teammates for so many years with Eli Manning, and how upset they were and how positive and effusive they were in their praise of Eli Manning. When you heard the news, what was your reaction?
Well, I was disappointed, Trey. You know, just the guy that has done nothing but represent the organization with the utmost class, has pursued excellence both on and off the field. I mean, it takes a special type of individual to play quarterback in New York City, and Eli Manning during his tenure has done nothing but represent the Giants in the most classy fashion. So it's disappointing to see the organization make the decision in this fashion to handle Eli this way at the end of his career. It's just disappointing to see that my former teammate, a guy that works hard, and I know it sounds cliche, but he was the first one in the building. He was the last one to leave, always willing to do anything that he could as a teammate to help you. And I think that shows in his decision not to try to start this week, just in the interest of maintaining the streak, but actually deferring to Geno Smith and or Davis Webb, making sure those guys get the reps.
The decision happening. From a business side of it, is there any part of you taking away the teammate and the like for Eli Manning? I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Is there any part of you that understands this from a business decision to look at the other quarterbacks?
Well, realistically, Mike, I don't understand it, and here's why. Because the Giants are in a position right now where they're 2-9, and they're probably going to have a high draft pick. And I think any reasonably minded person would think that the Giants would use that in order to get the successor for Eli Manning with all of the young quarterbacks in the 2018 draft class. So to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know what you're expecting to see from Geno Smith and or Davis Webb that would preclude you from taking a quarterback in next year's draft. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand that decision at all.
Chris, so you mentioned that. And we said part of this is who the decision was made in favor of, but also who it was made by. And there's been a lot of growing tension and wondering about Ben McAdoo and his future with this organization. But I'm interested in you knowing this organization as well as you do. Is this something that you think the Maras signed off on and had to know about and agree to before it went public?
Well, I think they had to sign off on this decision. I mean, I couldn't imagine that Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese just made this decision with that level of autonomy without running it past John Mara or Steve Tisch. So I'd have to imagine that they actually spoke with ownership about it, and ownership agreed to let those guys make that decision. But that being said, I just don't think it's the right decision. I mean, what type of message are you sending to the rest of the guys in the locker room? Eli Manning is the quarterback on that roster that gives you the best chance to win games now. I understand you're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. I get that. But if it's about competition, if it's about winning games, then he represents the best chance for us to win games right now. So to me, it doesn't make any sense to hold Eli Manning accountable for a 2-9 season. Doesn't feel right.
Chris Canty with us, a Super Bowl champion teammate of Eli Manning, co-host of Humpty and Canty, which follows us on ESPN 98.7 FM on ESPN, joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You know, Chris, the one thing that really, outside of the emotions that Eli saw, which were really, I mean, he laid it all out there for people, the emotions that so many of his teammates showed for him and how effusive they were in their praise. Eli has always sort of been that guy that is sort of, he was bland Manning, for lack of better. Peyton has all the spicy commercials and does all this stuff, but there's always, it seems like from his teammates, this burning desire that you don't really see on his face, but you see obviously as a teammate of his. And to your point about how he represented New York, he asked for this. You remember, he was drafted by the then right. San Diego Chargers, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world to say, hey, I want to go and have a laid-back situation in San Diego. He wanted to be in New York. What does that, or how does that fit with the person that you knew and played with?
Well, he just embraced the opportunity. I mean, being the quarterback of the New York Giants is special. Being a part of this organization is a special thing. And so to see him handle it the way that he has over all these years and do nothing but try to bring excellence and bring championships to that franchise. I mean, the excellence speaks for itself, right? The commitment to winning speaks for itself, because how else do you have a streak of 210 consecutive games started? Like, it takes a lot to be able to start and have that type of longevity in the National Football League. So for the organization to handle him this way, it just doesn't feel right. A lot of guys have acknowledged that it's the wrong thing to do. It's just, I understand that you want to get a look at the young quarterbacks and try to evaluate so you can formulate a plan going in the next offseason, but it's just not how you handle Eli Manning. I understand what the book says, but Eli Manning is that transcendent talent that you just shouldn't handle that way. And it just feels wrong on all levels.
Yep, I think we all completely agree with that. That said, as this thing, nothing stops. There's going to be a game this week, the end of this year, and then next year as well. So when next year rolls around, McAdoo, Jerry Reese, the GM, Eli Manning, how many of them are with the New York Giants?
Well, Golic, I don't know that any of them are. And to me, this decision to bench Eli signifies a shift in organizational philosophy, and I think more significant changes are on the horizon. You have to start with Jerry Reese. Since 2012, his record as the general manager of the New York Giants, they're 41-50, which is below the expectations for this organization. Ben McAdoo, after an 11-5 year and losing in the wild card round, getting into the playoffs for the first time in 5 seasons last year, they're 2-9 through 12 weeks of the regular season. So obviously that's not good enough. And then the situation with Eli Manning, you saw how emotional he was when everybody was asking him the questions about what would be with his career next year. He said he didn't know. He didn't want to get into it. To me, I don't know that this situation now with him and the organization has reached a point where it's irreparable. So I have serious question marks about any of those guys being with the franchise next year.
Well, we could be talking about a massive cleaning of house
absolutely.
With the Giants, and one of the more stable organizations in the NFL over all these years. I heard someone on Twitter put it best: replacing Eli Manning with Geno Smith is like replacing Tom Coughlin with Ben McAdoo. It's sort of the way it works. Chris, obviously you've got a lot to talk about on 98.7 ESPN FM in New York. We appreciate you being with us. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Trey Wingo and Mike Golic Sr. Let's bring in our John Gruden, our Monday Night Football analyst on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. John, so many of Eli's former teammates have had a strong reaction to this. What was your reaction when you found out that Eli Manning was being benched and they were putting in Geno Smith?
Well, I was shocked. I was really shocked. I'm still shocked, really. I just think his loyalty, his toughness. This is the man of the year in the NFL. He's done it all for the Giants. And I think, when you made the decision that you weren't going to play the rookie quarterback at all in the preseason, not a snap that I see him really, other than end of games and maybe the 4th preseason game, it was all about Josh Johnson and Geno Smith battling for Eli's backup job. But I was shocked. I think they have so much invested in Eli Manning and what he's represented for so long. I didn't like the way this was handled, but look, I don't know all the facts, but I was stunned, and I still am.
I think we're all stunned for the fact that it was Geno Smith, a guy you already have a pretty good resume on. Let me ask it this way, from a guy who was a head coach and a big quarterback guy, just from a business standpoint, if you had blinders on, if in fact they did say they were benching Eli for the rookie so they could get a look at the rookie, would that have been more understandable to you, or would it still been the wrong move to you?
It would have been understandable had they been given the rookie quarterback a lot of work in the preseason. We had him in the preseason, Mike. We had him against the Cleveland Browns, and he didn't even play. They were working on the other 2 quarterbacks. So I'm shocked that they even consider playing this rookie. He's under redshirt mode. He doesn't belong in the NFL this year, in my opinion, because he had no training camp, he had no reps, and it's ridiculous to think that this is a tryout camp in a regular season game. The Giants have had major struggles on the offensive line. The wide receivers are all hurt and beat up. They haven't run the ball, and I just think Eli Manning for another month as your starting quarterback would have been the right thing to do, and then maybe get a meeting of the minds and consider what our next options are. But look, I'm shocked, I'm speechless, and I hope you got some other questions for me because I'm starting to ramble here.
John, I guess the other question would be concerning the guy who is going to get the start this weekend, and Geno Smith. New York fans have already made up their mind that they expect nothing out of him, but you're someone who's worked with almost every quarterback that's come into the league recently. Is there any belief in your mind that there could be some growth from Geno Smith, that we could see something more than we have thus far?
There's no doubt. These young quarterbacks, I didn't think Geno Smith was ready to play as a rookie coming out of West Virginia. I mean, he's in a no-huddle offense. He had no idea what he was getting into. And then they had a changing of coordinators in New York. That wasn't like that was a situation that was set up for tremendous success. They weren't loaded with personnel around Geno Smith. He had some good games. He had some horrific games. He had some terrible turnover games. Like a lot of young quarterbacks, they break down. They break down. You got to take them to the shop. You got to fix them up. You got to give these guys some time. I got Rich Gannon in Oakland when he was 34 years old. My dad drafted Steve Young in a supplemental draft in the first round with the Buccaneers, and we didn't think he was any good. They told my dad, get him out of here because he wasn't any good. You know, sometimes these quarterbacks take time, but everybody wants to write their story on the website and pin up that the guy's a bust. Who knows what can happen? He's got to take advantage of this opportunity and show something. And it's just a shocking situation for sure.
Yeah, John Gruden joins us, our Monday Night Football analyst. It's funny you mentioned Steve. The one thing I remember from his career in Tampa was that game in Green Bay where he got sacked and that the creamsicle helmets and the snows everywhere, and we're like, boy, that sums up his career. Yeah. And then he goes to the Hall of Fame with the first ballot. So you're right, things do change. And with that in mind, let's move from the possibility of what Eli may or may not do this year. He's 37 in January. Do you think he can go somewhere else that has more weapons around him and still be a productive quarterback, like Jacksonville or maybe Denver? All these teams, or even San Francisco, even though they got Jimmy Garoppolo, there's no guarantee that he's going to be the guy there. Can he go somewhere else and still be productive?
I think he can. I think it's a matter of, number one, is his heart really still in it? You know, when you get to be 35, 36, 37 years old, you've made a ton of money, you've had a ton of success, do you really want to go through the journey, through the grind, make the commitment to go do it again and then fresh start someplace? Do you really want to do that? It's exhausting what you have to do behind the scenes as a frontline quarterback in the NFL. You got to call the plays. You got to install the plays during the CBA lockout. You got to teach the players the plays, the protections, the audibles, the hand signals. That's what Eli Manning is. He is a great coach on the field. He can help the team. You want him on your team. You want him in your locker room. What he represents is the true essence of what people are looking for. So it's all up to him. He's got to bite the bullet right now. I think he's handled it with tremendous class, which he'll continue to do. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if some team that's on the rise brings him in.
He's handled it about as professional as you can, and you would expect nothing less. So a guy who's not going to start after 210 starts to a guy who's going to get his first start with his new team, Jimmy Garoppolo takes over in San Francisco. So take us all behind the scenes a little bit on this one, John. Here's a guy who's been there about a month. The Kyle Shanahan playbook, from what we understand, can be a difficult one to digest the whole thing. But so where do you think he could be in that process? How much of it could he be able to put forth on the field, and what are the expectations?
Well, the expectations are going to be very high because this quarterback, Garoppolo, has been coveted by a lot of teams. There's been a lot of speculation about him, A, being Tom Brady's successor, B, being traded to a number of different teams for a long time. So the expectations are high. They're going to remain high. But the reality is, without an off-season program, without a quarterback orientation, without a training camp, without a lot of reps with your new team, how can you realistically expect a lot? I mean, this is not Major League Baseball where you trade a third baseman and you bat them third in the lineup, and you say, hey, go, we're going to turn the double play just like you did on your previous team. It's not like that. So I really think that he'll have some struggles. Obviously, the 49ers are rebuilding. That's another issue. But he is athletic. He's a great young man, and he will, I think, continue to improve and hopefully give the 49er faithful some high hopes and expectations for their future.
John, from young quarterbacks back to one of the established veterans, saw one of the better games we've seen in recent memory from Phillip Rivers and the Chargers win this last Sunday. What's your outlook on this team going forward, especially given the slide we've seen from the Chiefs in that division?
You know what? I saw the Chargers up close when we were getting ready for the Bronco game. They absolutely crushed the Broncos in L.A. And what really jumped at me was their pass rush. You can talk about Bosa and Ingram for the next 30 minutes on your show. These two men are real deals, man. Mm-hmm. They can rush the passer, and they can get after your quarterback. And if they get a lead with Phillip Rivers, it's over because it's a hard unit to block. Gus Bradley's done an excellent job. I'm not trying to get off track here, but this defense is getting Phillip Rivers the ball repeatedly. I saw it on Thanksgiving Day. And when you give Rivers this many opportunities, he's so advanced. He's so great at recognizing defenses and communicating what he wants done. He is one of the all-time great competitors behind the scenes. He's so prepared. But if you give Rivers the ball and a good defense, this is a real dangerous team.
Well, look, I think he threw for 7,000 yards against the Cowboys in that game. And, John, it is interesting because the San Diego Chargers, not as they are now, but the 92 San Diego Chargers are the only team in NFL history to start a season 0-4 and make the postseason. The L.A. Chargers started this season 0-4, and interestingly, ironically, however you want to put it, coincidentally, they ended that 0-4 start against the Giants and got that one win. And they have a real chance now, John, to make the playoffs because not only of how they're playing, but as you alluded to it, how much Kansas City has fallen off the face of the planet. 5-0 start. They were averaging almost 33 points a game. Kareem Hunt was running up and down the field. Since that time, they're 1-5. Kareem's yards have gone from 122 a game to 40-something. His yards per carry have been cut in half. What has gone wrong in Kansas City?
Well, before we move off San Diego, remember they lost a couple of those games early because they couldn't make a field goal, for crying out loud. You got to keep it in perspective. It wasn't like they were getting drilled. So San Diego is better, I think, than
Los
that
Angeles
0-4 start. Yeah, I keep saying San Diego.
We all do.
Yeah, I probably will continue to do that for another month. But when it comes to Kansas City, were they that good at the beginning of the season? I mean, they had a lot of novelty plays, crazy formations. They caught, I think, the world by storm, starting with the New England Patriots, plays that they had never seen before, they couldn't possibly prepare for in the opening game. And, you know, I think the injuries on the offensive line have played a role. Obviously, Alex Smith is in a slump. Teams have probably had more film to get ready. Their defense hasn't generated turnovers like they had last year. And to put a bow around this, I think the whole NFL has a lot of 8-8, 9-7, 7-9 teams right now. I don't think Kansas City, even though they got off to a great start, necessarily was an impact team that was going to sustain that the whole season. They have some injuries and they have some things they've got to address, and I'm sure Andy Reid will do that.
John, let's finish up for your game Monday night, Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Mike Tomlin has openly already talked about looking ahead to Week 15 with a matchup against the Patriots, but they have Cincinnati, and we saw the secondary certainly giving up some plays and blowing some coverages in their game this past week. Do you see that as their biggest weakness right now going forward as trying to be the team that will match up with New England later on?
I like the Steelers. I really like their defensive coordinator. This Keith Butler does a lot of great things, Mike. I mean, they have some really good blitzes. They can rush 3. They can rush 5. They make it all look the same. They play hard. They blew some coverages, 2 in the first 10 plays. They get caught in uncomfortable man-to-man coverage on a screen pass that breaks out. And then Artie Burns, he just blew a coverage in a 3-deep zone. They only rushed 3 guys. It was a maximum zone, and to give up a long touchdown on that was incredible. I don't think that's going to happen again. They're playing hard. Roethlisberger is in a groove, and this number 84 is sensational. And don't forget, Le'Veon Bell is the best in football. I think the Steelers, with their defense, with all the things they can do on offense, I think they have a great opportunity to get to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and that game could be in Pittsburgh, depending on what happens Week 15 when the Patriots come to town. They both sit at 9-2, best records in the AFC. John, as always, we appreciate it. Look forward. Keep studying those college players as we get ready for the draft. Okay, my man.
Thanks, John.
Hey, you got it. Hey, congratulations on this new gig, man. You get to sit up there on the TV with two Golics every morning. I can't wait to follow this show forever, man.
Well, thanks, John.
We appreciate that, John. You may outlast me. John Gruden.
All right, guys. Have a good week.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast. What a day, what a show, what a time.
I tell you what, a great sports night last night, no doubt about it.
1, 2, 3, 4. I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I'm so happy, I feel like I can fly.
Disclaimer, you will not be able to fly by switching to Geico. This is against the laws of physics and nature. If you find yourself flying, please seek professional and or medical help immediately. In the unlikely event you find yourself flying, you might be a superhero, or a pigeon, or a superhero named Pidgewoman, who was bitten by a radioactive pigeon. If you are indeed Pidgewoman, Geico retains all licensing publishing rights in the event Pidgewoman the movie becomes a top-grossing Hollywood blockbuster.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
We roll on Golic and Wingo. Trey Wingo and Mike Golic here with you. Lots to get into. So much in the NFL and so much going on with what happened with LeBron James, but also major stuff to talk about in college football. And for that, we are delighted to bring in Kirk Herbstreit, our ESPN college football analyst extraordinaire. All right, listen, Kirk, first and foremost right now, there's so much to get into from the penultimate rankings. Do you think the committee got it right with 1 through 4 last night?
First of all, congratulations, fellas. First time I had a chance to join you. Congrats on your show, and it'll be a lot of fun to listen to you guys every morning.
Thank you, sir.
I would say, yeah. I mean, I don't think you could argue a little bit about where maybe Oklahoma, Auburn, Clemson would be, but I think all 4 of the teams are up in the top 4 that should be there.
You sound less than convinced, Herbie.
No, I don't think it really matters, I guess, Trey, is the reason. It's all just going to come down to this weekend. So it doesn't really matter where, in my opinion anyway. If Clemson wins, they're in, and they're going to be sitting there at 1. If Auburn wins, they're in. Oklahoma, Wisconsin, that's the easy thing, and that never happens. So people are going to lose this weekend, and that's when we're going to get into some pretty heated debates about who should be in. But I do have to say this. It's the 4th year we've had the playoff. We went from the BCS where there was 2 teams. Now we're in the playoff with 4. How exciting is it to go down the list here of rankings? And Clemson, Auburn, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, even Alabama, who's not playing this weekend, Georgia, who is, Miami, who's playing Clemson, Ohio State, who's playing Wisconsin, USC, who's playing Stanford, maybe even TCU, who's playing Oklahoma. You could make an argument that 10 teams possibly are still alive to try to make it into the Final Four.
It is pretty crazy, but what you said in the beginning is listen, it's not rocket science for any of us. If the top 4 teams all win, they're going to be in. And it's, as I said earlier, you'll have a lot of filler material on your show. Sorry, but we all know that's just kind of the way it is. But also what you said I think is true is rarely do we see that going to happen. We already have a first in a 2-loss team in the top 4. We could get another first if a team outside the top 5 jumps in. What did you make of, and by that I mean a Miami team at 7, if they win, we believe they're going to be in. But what did you think of the fact that they had Ohio State at 8? Was that any kind of message to you from the committee that, man, it's going to be really tough to jump from 8 into that top 4? Or do you just think that's kind of where it fell and that was about right?
No, I think that's about where they should be. Just based on the way the season has played out and the way these other teams have played in front of them. So, with that being said, we're one. I keep saying upset. Ohio State upsetting Wisconsin. They're actually favored, but we're 1 game away. If Ohio State beats Wisconsin, and whatever happens, it's irrelevant what happens in those other games. You're going to get into a pretty heated debate about what should happen with that 4th spot. The other little bit of a wild card here is if this is something we didn't talk about enough last night. If Miami beats Clemson in a close game, and you start to look at Clemson's resume, despite not being ACC champs, and they're 11-2, and you look what they've been able to accomplish throughout their regular season, Clemson's probably going to end up still making the playoff. So you would essentially have two ACC teams. Miami is the champ, and Clemson, just based on its credentials, still making it in over a team like Ohio State or others. So there's still some stuff that could happen that could really frustrate people. But I think if Ohio State wins and they make a statement and everything else plays out, Clemson wins, the Auburn-Georgia winner's irrelevant, Oklahoma wins, then it's probably going to come down to Ohio State and Alabama for that 4th spot. And if you look at it on paper, if you just look at the two teams on paper based on resume, and you go to what the committee looks at, there's variables when it becomes a cluster of teams at the end, and that's where those 4 variables come in: head-to-head, conference champ, common opponent, strength of schedule, and head-to-head doesn't apply. Common opponent doesn't apply. Strength of schedule is a wash, and then conference champ would give Ohio State an edge over Alabama. So I think if you looked at what the committee is going to be looking at, Ohio State on paper would have the advantage over Bama. The only way that Bama would go in over Ohio State is if collectively that committee said, we know Ohio State's a conference champ and Alabama's not. We just think that Alabama's better, so let's put Alabama in. That would be really the only way that they could put Alabama in. And then people bring up, well, last year Ohio State didn't even go to their conference championship game, and they made it in. Why shouldn't Alabama? The difference is Ohio State had 3 wins in the final rankings over teams that were in the top 10 of the final college football playoff rankings. 3 wins over top 10 teams. Alabama's best win right now is over LSU, who's sitting down at 17. So it's very, very different comparison to what Ohio State was able to achieve last year and what Alabama's trying to accomplish this year.
I agree with that, Herbie, but let me ask you this. Do you agree with doing that? If you start in yourself going through your own criteria or even the criteria of the committee and what they say, and it's very close, do you at the end, would you be fine with people saying, you know what, it's close, I just think this team is better, so I'm going to choose this team over that team? Is that okay in your mind?
I am. Yeah, if you think that, because after all, we're trying to get the best 4 teams into this, and if collectively the group says we just think Alabama is a better team, it would be it would go against what they say they do when they get to these cluster teams. But if you think they're better, despite one of the teams having a conference championship and one of them not, despite the resumes being almost identical as far as strength of schedule, Ohio, you could knock Ohio, you could put holes in Ohio State's resume. Wow, they lost to Iowa. They gave up 55 to Iowa. They got beat by Oklahoma early in the year and shut it down in the 4th quarter, got embarrassed at home. And then you could put knocks into Oklahoma or into Alabama, rather, and say, and this is my point on Alabama, is their best football was being played in September and October. I'm big personally for getting the committee and their variables and everything they're looking. I personally, when I'm evaluating, because it's subjective, how you two or how the committee or how anybody evaluates is up to them. Me personally, I like to see how a team is trending. It's kind of like March Madness. The teams that get hot at the right time are dangerous. I'm big on that. And so how are you playing? Yeah, you might have you might have fallen short. Auburn lost to Clemson in week 2, but boy, are they trending in a good direction right now. I have them at the number 1 team personally, even though they lost to Clemson, because of the way they've been playing for the last 4 or 5 weeks. Bama against Mississippi State, because of all the injuries that they've sustained at linebacker spot, they're just not the Bama defense that we're accustomed to seeing.
Right.
And then against Auburn, and we saw it again. So they're not necessarily trending to be able to play their best football the way they were, let's say, in September and October. So it would be very, very difficult for the committee to look at Bama and say, yeah, man, they are playing great football right now. They're definitely one of the best 4 teams. It just doesn't – personally, I think if any Alabama fan's being honest with himself, they're comparing this Alabama team to previous Alabama teams. It just doesn't add up.
Well, it certainly doesn't at the moment, but it does add up for Auburn. Kirk Herbstreit with us, brought to you by Allstate. He had Stanford head coach David Shaw on the latest episode of his podcast, Herbstreit and Fitzsimmons. You can subscribe and listen to that on the ESPN app. What's the biggest difference, Herbie, you see with Auburn from that team that had those couple of losses earlier in the season? And then just how critical is it for Kerryon Johnson to be Kerryon Johnson for them to have a chance to beat Georgia for the second time in, 4 weeks?
Well, I think the first thing that's obvious is their offense is very, very different with Jarrett Stidham. Week 2, essentially week 1, they opened up with Georgia Southern. So their first real game was going on the road to Death Valley to take on the defending national champ. And they lost 14-6. And, yeah, Clemson has a great defense. But if they were still trying to find an identity with Stidham. This is an offense that's had Cam Newton and Nick Marshall. And when they were really rolling, they had a quarterback that was a threat running the football. And now you don't have that. And so it took them a little bit of time to kind of figure out what can this Stidham guy really do. And they had to figure out the running back situation. Kerryon Johnson became an elite SEC running back. But early in the year, they didn't really know what they were doing at that position because they had other guys that were very capable. So they found themselves offensively. And the other big thing is, like same thing in the NFL, they got confident. They had some big wins. They found ways to win some tough games. And all of a sudden, the Georgia game at home, it was the perfect storm. You knock off the number 1 team. You just knock them off 40-17, blew them out, dominated the football game. All of a sudden, they start walking around with their chests puffed out, believing in each other, which is a dangerous thing, in November. And then here comes Alabama in the Iron Bowl. It's big bad Nick Saban in Alabama. And they dominate the line of scrimmage in that game. So I just think that they became a confident team, and they found an identity with Kerryon Johnson and figured out what Stidham can do well as a quarterback. And with all that being said, guys, you know how hard it is in college football to beat a really good team twice in about 3 or 4 weeks, and to go now into a neutral site to take on Georgia, who is going to be furious. I mean, that is going to be a game for the ages to see how Georgia with Kirby Smart comes out against Auburn after getting embarrassed by them a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you're right. It's going to be really hard to think that Auburn's going to be able to dominate them the way they did just a few weeks ago, which is going to make that game so spicy. And, of course, you're going to be part of the ACC Clemson champion, Miami game, so we're looking forward to that. Herbie, we appreciate you being on with us. Thanks so much, pal.
Thanks, Kirk.
You got it, fellas. Talk to you soon.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast. It was all sort of one big giant Jell-O mold.
It's very interesting where that went.
We are delighted now to be joined on that Shell Pennzoil Performance line by the head coach of the defending national champion Clemson Tigers and the team number 1 in the poll in the latest rankings that came out. Dabo Swinney is with us. Dabo, good morning, and thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Good to be with you guys. Congrats on the show.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We're 3 days in, and they're still letting us on the air.
There you go.
I think we're doing something okay. Dabo, what did it mean for you as the defending champs in college football to come out and have that number 1 ranking going into what is going to be a huge weekend, conference championship weekend?
It was great. I mean, this time of year, I always tell people early part of the year, it just doesn't matter. I mean, but this time of year, it's when it matters because the regular season is over and we're all focused on postseason now, and you want to have the best, finish that you possibly can have. And that's whether you're in the Final Four or you're 10th or 15th or 20th, whatever. And so I think that for us, it's just a reflection that we've had a really good year. It's a credit to the players and a lot of hard work put in, and so we're excited to be in the hunt. But we want to be number 1 on Sunday. That's when we know that all the games have been played, and right now we're 4 quarters away from that, and going to be a big challenge. Miami wants the same thing that we want, and that's the opportunity.
Along those lines, I really think coaches have it in their DNA to understand the gravity of the situation, keep focused on the game at hand, the task at hand, not let anything get too big. But 18 to 22-year-olds are a little different than that, as you well know, Coach. So how do you keep them? Now, they certainly have the experience of being in title games and winning championships, but it's still another big game that can set them up. So how do you deal with them in this era of social media and what they read and what they talk about as opposed to what's in a coach's DNA?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that probably helps us just because, it's every week. I mean, it's the biggest game of the year every single week. We say that as coaches all the time, but with the help of social media, it is the biggest game of the year every week because, we just played our state championship last week. We had Florida State. I mean, in any of those games, if you lose those games, then you kind of fall out of that playoff hunt. And so we've been in a playoff mode around here since the 1st of November. And so it's just kind of another week for us. It's the next step. I think the leadership of our team has done a great job. And, these guys are focused. I mean, they understand that it's just football and what you have to do to win football games. And you guys, especially when you're playing against a really good team like Miami. So that's what our focus is. We don't have any illusions that, are sitting around worrying about, we're number one, let's have a party today. No, we're focused on trying to find a way to win this game, I promise you. And so is Miami, so it's just a matter of finishing the way we all want to finish. That's what's most important at this point. But we've got a good focus with our leadership.
Well, Dabo, one thing you're going to have to focus on when playing Miami is avoiding those turnovers because they love to break out that chain. And we've seen them turn a lot of close games around just on those turnovers. Look, I know that's something you probably preach to the players every week, but with such an emphasis that Miami's defense has put on this, are you sort of reinforcing that notion going into this game?
Well, every week we kind of have a daily focus every day, and actually yesterday was our turnover Tuesday, if you will. We talk a lot about that every week, how important the turnover margin is, and we study the other team and we look at us, and both these teams we've scored 77 points off of turnovers this year. They've scored 72 points off of turnovers this year. So both teams have been opportunistic. I think we've had a non-offensive touchdown in every road game that we've had this year. So, I think both teams have done a good job with that, and that certainly will probably be the difference in the game Saturday night is the turnover margin and probably a couple big plays. That's usually what it comes down to in championship football. But they've had an unbelievable year for sure, and I hope we can keep that chain in that box or whatever they carried in. That's for sure.
Yeah, you don't want to see it come out because Golic had to wear it after the Notre Dame game, and it was depressing for everybody.
It was awful.
Yeah, I watched that tape. It was depressing to watch it. Watching the coach's tape. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was just as depressing watching it on TV as well as an alumni and former player, believe me. We're talking to Dabo Swinney, head coach at Clemson, as they get ready to take on Miami in the ACC championship game and all the conference championship games this weekend. And what's interesting for players and coaches, you play a game and then everybody waits for 13 human beings in a room to decide things. So along those lines of criteria in your mind, how important is a conference championship and what should it mean in that process?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. I think you have to evaluate it every year. I don't think you can just say, well, we got to have the conference champion. What if you got 2 7-5 teams playing for the conference championship? So I think you just have to evaluate the big picture of the conference, who they've played, what type of year they've had. Certainly in our case, here in the ACC and the teams that we play week in and week out, and the season we've had, the season Miami's had, I don't see how that if we win or Miami wins that the ACC champion is not in the playoffs. That would be crazy to me. Now that's based on this season and the big picture. But again, I think it's a year-to-year thing. I think some years you might have a 11-1 team playing a 8-4 team, that won the right games and got in the playoff and they somehow win. Well, does that mean they're better than an 11-1 team that maybe didn't make it because they got beat by a 12-0 team? Probably not. So I just think that's why they got, people sitting around trying to, speak some common sense and rationale in the air and come up with the best 4 teams. And to this point, I think they've pretty much gotten it right, in the past few years. So I think it's been a good system for everyone, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out for sure this year.
Clemson's Dabo Swinney with us on Golic and Wingo. One of the hardest things to do in any sport is repeat as champions. And I know there are several other games before you're going to have that opportunity. But even in the NFL, as Golic can attest to playing, and I'm covering the NFL for so many years, to keep those players focused and on the task at hand and not seeing the big picture or looking 2 or 3 games ahead. And these are guys that are 25, 26, even in their 30s, keeping them going. It's got to be that much more difficult for you, Dabo, talking to 19 and 20-year-olds. How have you been able to keep them focused on realizing that to get to where you want to go, you have to take it one step at a time?
Yeah, and it definitely is a challenge, especially in college, because as you said there, but you get so much turnover. You develop strong leaders, and then they leave. They're gone. And so any given, like this year, we only have 6 seniors on our whole roster. So we're a really young team. We've got a good, strong junior class, but we're mostly freshmen and sophomores. And so I think the biggest thing is for us, we won 81 games in the last 7 years. And only Alabama's won more. And I think with that comes a mentality that it takes, a mindset. And so for me, it's nurturing that every year. And the way I do that is I start over every single year. I don't assume anything. I literally start over everything that we do, evaluate everything, reinstall the program from scratch, A to Z, all of our core values, and not just, hey, this is what we do, but more importantly, this is why we do it, and create the buy-in. And that starts in January. It's a new journey, and you have to create that buy-in and be able to articulate that vision each and every year for a new team. And because it is a new team, new journey, new challenges, new leadership. You look at our team this year. Oh my goodness, we lost a lot of people off of offense, and so it's also making sure the guys who aren't playing this year, for example, that we're doing a great job in teaching them and keeping those red shirts engaged and developing those guys that nobody see in play right now, making sure that we play guys when we get the opportunity, how we rep people in practice, because in college, again, guys are leaving. And so, you want to have guys ready to step up, and it's not just physically, it's mentally too. And you have to have a certain mindset to be able to win consistently. That is the biggest challenge. And probably the thing that I'm most proud of is, I'm so happy we won the national championship. That's great, but that's so hard to do. Everything's got to go right. My goal has always been to just have a consistent program that year in and year out is in the hunt, and that takes a lot of buy-in. It takes the right culture, and so for me, that's what I focus on every single day, is making sure that we've got the mindset right. That's with our staff, that's with everybody in the building, and certainly our players.
Well, you've certainly established that, and we see you as the number 1 team going into conference championship weekend. We're looking forward to seeing that game, Clemson-Miami, Saturday at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and 8 o'clock on ABC. Dabo, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Best of luck this weekend and potentially beyond.
Thanks, Coach.
I appreciate it, guys. Good luck to y'all.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
Let's not expect too much. There's only one person out there that's expecting way too much out of this guy too early. We know who that is. It's his father.
We have had a ton of guests coming up, and we'll have a couple more this hour for you. Obviously, one of the big stories of the day was the news that Eli Manning's benching after 210 consecutive starts at quarterback for the New York Football Giants, second only to Brett Favre's 297 for a myriad of teams that included the Packers, the Jets, and the Minnesota Vikings. Let's be clear, this is a tough day for the Giants, and Giants fans have been very upset about it. Eli, obviously, very emotional about it.
Right.
That being said, we decided to do something.
Yes, we did. Listen,
and we understand it's a sensitive topic. We get all that.
Come on. But you know what? It's always good to just chuckle a little bit. First and foremost, this is very real. Prince Harry got engaged to Meghan Markle, and there is an actual town crier.
The Buckingham Town Crier, Buckingham Palace.
Buckingham Palace, the town crier, this is real, made the announcement of that engagement.
Buckingham Palace proudly announce the engagement of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. God save the Queen.
What I didn't understand is I thought it was hear ye, and he's going like, oh yay.
Oh yay, oh yay.
Oh yay, oh yay.
Old English.
I think
everyone puts their own spin on it.
Okay, all right. Tomato?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Potato.
Okay.
All right. Dabo.
Okay.
It all works. Sweeney.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, that was real.
Yes.
Let us be 100% clear. This about what happened with the New York Football Giants yesterday is not real.
Hear ye, oh yay. Buckingham Palace hereby announces with deepest regret the fate of one of our own. Could over 200 consecutive starts save him? Nay. Could 2 Super Bowl rings save him? Nay. Could 18-1 save him? Nay. Nor could he be saved by pedigree of name. So it is with the heaviest of hearts I hand down the fate of one of our own town criers. Elisha Nelson Manning is hereby decreed by the New York Football Giants benched.
Not real.
You know, the more I hear that, do you really have to say that? Do you really think if you didn't say not real, that people would have heard that and said, you know what? I can't believe the Giants did that. I mean, do you really think you needed the disclaimer?
People believe the earth is flat. Okay. People believe the earth is flat.
I mean, that would have been the more amazing thing to me if you didn't say anything and we just said, this is how the Giants did it.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen our Twitter feed of people saying,
Did that really happen?
Did that really happen? Yeah.
That's Jerry. You did a great. The best thing was the roll on the R's.
Without question. And I like the nigh. The 2 Super Bowl rings save him. Nigh. Oh,
18
so
and 1.
good.
Nigh.
So good. Yeah.
All right. So that's a lot to get into, and the changes that are going to be making with the Giants and what they're going to go forward. Not only with Geno Smith this week, but they're going to try and get the rookie Davis Webb in as well. Then let's get into it now. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. And joining us now is the former Jets head coach, who works with us now here at ESPN on Sunday NFL Countdown, Rex Ryan. Rex, thanks for being with us. Your take on the news that Eli Manning is no longer the starting quarterback of the Giants?
I was just shocked. And I think in this situation, Eli is a guy that's an iconic figure there. Like he is the New York, Giants. Like that's what you're thinking. And for him to go out like this, if you've moved on from Eli, you've decided to move on from him, just let him finish it out. I mean, your season, where are you going anyway? And let him finish it out. But for a guy that has meant so much to a franchise, I just think it was mishandled.
Rex, if as a head coach, if you are in fact going to make a decision like this, with the gravity of this situation of who the player is there a right and or better way to do it?
Well, I believe there is. Number one, this is hardly Eli Manning's fault. When you watch this team try to protect the quarterback, all that kind of stuff, it's not on Eli Manning. Eli, I was watching the other day, and, this Ingram kid's a really talented kid. He's about all they got out there right now, as far as targets. And, I see the kid drop 3 passes on 3rd down, but that's on Eli? Like, I don't get it. And to me, it's an unfortunate situation. And I'm sure, Giant fans everywhere are upset with this decision.
Well, clearly, and we've been hearing it from a lot of folks in New York. And one of the things that I think speaks to Eli and the way he prepared for the game and played the game and dealt with people was the outrage by so many of his former teammates about how this went down and how they were upset and shocked like you say you were. But let's take a bigger picture here, Rex. He'll be 37 in January. This is his 14th season. At what point do the Giants need to start thinking life after Eli when it comes to the quarterback, especially with a quarterback-rich draft coming up this year?
Well, no. I mean, clearly this move tells you what the Giants are thinking. They've clearly moved on from Eli. They could say they haven't or whatever, but that's not the facts. There's no way. They definitely are moving on. So yeah, I can understand. All right, this year would be the year that you go into the draft, you go get you another quarterback. That's fine. I understand that. But you know, but I just think that you know, the situation that they had, it just makes no sense. I mean, it really makes no sense. And for such a classy organization that the Giants are supposed to be, and all that, I totally think they mishandled this.
So we're talking to Rex Ryan, former head coach with the Jets and the Buffalo Bills, now working with us on Sunday Countdown. So I gave it from kind of a player's perspective in a locker room. Now you have a locker room where you're 2-9. You have 11 games. You got 5 to go. So guys, you know, whether they're playing for themselves and their future or what's going on there, they just benched a quarterback, a great quarterback. The coach, certainly his job is in jeopardy and up in the air. Nobody knows what's going on. Probably the same with the GM. So I gave earlier from a player's perspective what it's like in that locker room. How about from a coach? You have to coach a team like that. How does those dynamics work?
It reminds me, and this is, you know, I mean, this is way greater than the situation I'm going to tell you. But when I was approached last year, you know, knowing that I wasn't going to be there, all that type of stuff, and I was told to bench Tyrod Taylor, I'm like, there's no way. I said, I'm not doing it. So you might as well fire me now because I'm not doing it. And I thought it was the wrong move. I thought it sent the wrong message to the locker room. You know, hey, it's okay for, you know, we're not going to play him because we're out of it, but it's okay to play you. Now, how's that guy going to feel? Well, they went out and got beat by the Jets JV team. That's what happened, you know, to them last year. So I think it's you know, we'll see how they respond. Obviously, you know, everybody is you know, playing for their jobs, what you see on tape, you know, even if they do make a move with the coach, you know, the new coaches are coming in, they're going to be watching these tapes, and you got to be a pro. I mean, you're an NFL player. However, I think that it's going to have a big ripple down effect. And if you're, you know, a fan of the Chargers or whoever these other teams are playing that the Giants are lined up to play, you're upset also because you wanted Eli Manning to be that quarterback, give your team a chance to win. And not saying, you know, Geno Smith's got talent. But it's not about Geno. And, you know, hey, I'm happy to see Geno get a chance, but not in these circumstances.
You know, Rex, I want to go back to one thing you just said. You said you were asked to bench Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo, and you said no, right? That's what you said?
Exactly.
Who asked you to do that?
You know, well, I'm just saying that it was, you know, it was strongly suggested that we play E.J. Manuel the last game. And, you know, I talked to Terry Pagula, and we had an understanding that, you know, he was going to move on. And I'm like, no, I just assumed that's not going to happen. Like, I was, you know, I told that kid that, you know, from day one that he's my quarterback, and that's how I felt about it. And, you know, so that's kind of, you know, what happened and what went down. And like I said, my point is you saw how that team played. You know, they went out, the Jets had a JV team out there, and yet they pounded the Bills. So,
and the reason, Rex, the reason I'm going back to that, I just want to make sure. So you were not surprised then, I guess, when Sean McDermott got up there this year and said, we're going with Nathan Peterman against the Chargers in L.A., who had obviously or arguably two of the best tandem pass rushers in the NFL, where a guy like Tyrod Taylor, whose nickname is T-Mobile, certainly would have seemed to have given them a better chance to win in that game.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that, you know, that situation right there, you know, did McDermott make the call or whatever? I have no idea. You know, if, you know, he certainly owned it, which he should, one way or the other. But to me, that wasn't even, you know, not even for the specific opponent. Tyrod Taylor's a decent quarterback, and you're going to put in this other kid that clearly wasn't ready to play. And, and now there's talk, well, they may go back to him. Well, what?
Yeah.
I think we've seen enough that this kid's not ready. He's got to prove that he could play in the NFL at some point, period, not as a starting quarterback in the NFL. So, and Tyrod Taylor's got the lowest interception percentage in the history of the National Football League. The reason you won those games is because of him. So that was why I was so shocked about that one.
So let's spin it now forward to proving yourself, because no matter what happened in New York yesterday, they're going to play a game and then another game and then another game. As we all know, time doesn't stand still. Geno started 29 games during your tenure with the Jets. He's getting a chance now, whether it's because they want to give him a chance or if Davis Webb isn't ready yet, I don't know. Either way, Geno gets to start. His 34th start as an NFL quarterback. What do we think about that? Is this a guy that can resurrect a career and have a second act?
Well, for Geno's sake, I hope so. I really do. Obviously, he'd have to play a lot better than he did, when he was the starting quarterback with the Jets. But, he did have some moments now. I'm telling you, the kid had – you go back and look at his career, he's 8-8 as a rookie quarterback in the league, and that's hard to do. So he does have some talent. But, again, he's also we've seen the good Geno, and we've also seen the bad Geno Smith, and the guy that's careless with the football that turns the ball over, those type of things. And it's hard to overcome those things.
It certainly is. And at what point has this to be about Davis Webb at some point, Rex? Because, look, like you said, the book on Geno, look, there's enough there to know what you may get. Look, you could get a Case Keenum situation out of there, and I understand that, and he's done a great job in reviving his career and changing the narrative on him. But you drafted Davis Webb last year. We know what a rich quarterback draft this is. Coming up in 2018. And like we said, Eli's going to be 37 in January. How much do you really think you have to see Davis Webb down these 5 final games of the regular season more than Geno Smith?
I can understand it, but I think by starting Geno Smith, you probably see what the Giants really think of Davis, of Davis Webb. They're probably not sold on it.
So, let me ask you this, because so many times we hear, well, we got to see him on the field, see what we can do on the field. And when they don't get on the field, then we say, well, they must be seeing something in practice. So for those that always think, well, you're only going to find out when they're on the field in an actual game, how much do you see and can you tell in practice that says this guy, I can put him on the field or I can't put him on the field?
Well, I think, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, there's some guys that seem to perform better when the lights come on, but in very few cases that actually exists. You could see it in the field, on the field. There'll be 2-minute situations. They'll do different things where they're moving the ball, even during the regular season. So I'm sure they've seen all those type of things, but. And in the preseason, that this kid really lighted up in the preseason, gave you some indication that this guy would be able to do it in the real games. You guys would know better than I would, but it's hard to say. But the fact they're going to Geno Smith, I don't understand that. If they're really looking for the future, unless they're deciding on could Geno Smith be our starter. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think the Giants don't know, and that's the bigger issue here going forward. Hey, I do want to talk to you about one player that you know very well who has played the game and the game of the business of football arguably better than anybody, and that's cornerback Darrelle Revis. He's going to make his debut for the Chiefs this week against the Jets. He's been out all season. No one has figured out how to maximize his value better in the NFL than Darrelle Revis. What are reasonable expectations for him, you think, coming back at late stage in his career and at this late stage in his season?
I think if the guy's in shape.
Life happens. With ADT, you can feel safe with an ADT starter kit professionally installed for only $49. Call today and install an ADT starter kit that includes security panel, keypad, key fob, entry and motion sensors, and for a limited time, get a camera included and installed at no additional cost. That's a $449 value installed for just $49.
Requires 36-month monitoring contrast QSB and Easy Pay. Activation and early return fees may apply. Certain marks excluded. License available at ADT.com, Florida EF001121, UBZ F1639.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
Chris Canty, host of Humpty and Canty, which follows us on ESPN 98.7 FM ESPN in New York, joins us now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. Chris, thanks for being with us on Golic and Wingo. Clearly, you guys are going to have a lot to talk about today. But one of the things that I've noticed once this news came down is the overwhelming reaction by people like yourself that were teammates for so many years with Eli Manning, and how upset they were and how positive and effusive they were in their praise of Eli Manning. When you heard the news, what was your reaction?
Well, I was disappointed, Trey. You know, just the guy that has done nothing but represent the organization with the utmost class, has pursued excellence both on and off the field. I mean, it takes a special type of individual to play quarterback in New York City. And Eli Manning, during his tenure, has done nothing but represent the Giants in the most classy fashion. So it's disappointing to see the organization make the decision in this fashion to handle Eli this way at the end of his career. It's just disappointing to see that my former teammate, a guy that works hard, and I know it sounds cliche, but he was the first one in the building. He was the last one to leave, always willing to do anything that he could as a teammate to help you. And I think that shows in his decision not to try to start this week, just in the interest of maintaining the streak, but actually deferring to Geno Smith and or Davis Webb